Friends, for the last 100 years, science fiction writers have been telling us the same story. Earth is heading for a precipice, resources are running out, and we must immediately escape to distant stars. Remember the classics of the genre. Heroes building a rocket in their backyard and flying off to colonize Alpha Centauri, escaping from an ecological catastrophe. But what if I told you that all these writers were wrong? That we don't need to fly to the ends of the Earth to build a thriving space civilization? Today, we'll talk about what's right under our noses. The Hill Sphere, our cosmic palace, 1.5 million kilometers in size from Earth. A space that receives 50,000 times more solar energy than our entire planet. An area where not 8 billion people, as it is now, but 50 billion people can live comfortably. Humanity's expansion into space will not begin with heroic flights to Proxima Centauri, but with the development of what is already rightfully ours, near-Earth space. We have already taken the first steps. On October 4th, 1957, we launched the first satellite. On April 12th, 1961, Gagarin opened the era of manned flights. But these were just reconnaissance missions. The real development will begin in the coming decades, with the construction of the first permanent settlements at the Lagrange points, the creation of space power plants, and the development of industry in zero gravity. By the end of this century, millions of people will be living in space. By the end of the next, billions. And only when we have fully mastered our Hill Sphere, only then will humanity take the next step, to the stars. Today, we will learn how our cosmic palace will become a home for trillions of people, and why the future of humanity begins not with a flight to distant worlds, but with the development of what is right next to us. Humanity's gravitational home. Scientifically speaking, the Hill Sphere is the region of space around our planet where Earth's gravity is stronger than the Sun's. Any celestial body, be it a natural asteroid or an artificial satellite, that enters this sphere automatically becomes a satellite of Earth. And everything that finds itself beyond its limits flies away and begins to orbit the Sun. But this is not just an abstract astronomical concept. It is our future living space, our cosmic backyard, which, in its scale, is capable of accommodating a civilization that we can only dream of for now. Breathtaking scales. And now let's talk about the size of this cosmic backyard of ours. The radius of the Hill Sphere is 1.5 million kilometers in all directions from Earth. To realize how much that is, let's compare it to something familiar. The diameter of our planet is about 12,700 kilometers, and the radius of the Hill Sphere is over 200 times larger than the entire diameter of the Earth. If the Earth were an ordinary soccer ball, the Hill Sphere would extend for about 20 kilometers in every direction from that ball. But the volumes are even more impressive. Imagine this. The volume of the Hill Sphere exceeds the volume of our planet by 11 million times. This means that, theoretically, one could place 11 million Earth-sized planets in this space. 11 million. A number so huge that the human mind can hardly grasp it. An energy treasure trove. And this space is not an empty, cold abyss. The notional surface of the Hill Sphere receives 50,000 times more solar energy than our planet gets. Think about that number. 50,000 times. If modern humanity consumes about as much energy as the Earth receives from the Sun, then the full development of the Hill Sphere will give us energy capabilities exceeding modern ones by tens of thousands of times. Every square meter of space in the region of Earth's orbit receives more than a kilowatt of solar energy. That's more than most modern electrical appliances consume for their operation. And all this energy is available around the clock, without clouds, without night, without atmospheric interference, from space to home. But the Hill Sphere is not just about energy and space. It is our future home, a place where our descendants will live, work, raise children, create art, and advance human civilization. Unlike distant planets, which are months and years of flight away, the Hill sphere remains within the reach of modern technologies. Even its most distant regions can be reached in a few days of travel. This means that communication with Earth will remain practically instantaneous, trade and cultural exchange will flourish, and emergency assistance, if needed, can arrive in a reasonable time frame. The natural boundaries of development. Interestingly, the Hill sphere defines the natural boundaries of the first stage of humanity's space expansion. Until we master and settle this space, there is little point in flying further, to Mars, Jupiter, or other planets. After all, right next to us is a territory that, in its capabilities and resources, surpasses all the planets of the solar system combined. It's as if people living in a small village, instead of developing and cultivating the vast empty lands around their settlement, would set off to find new territories hundreds of kilometers away. It is more reasonable to first use what is at hand. A cosmic perspective. When astronomers first calculated the size of the Hill sphere, they probably perceived it simply as an interesting theoretical phenomenon. A region where Earth's gravity dominates over the Sun's, curious, but nothing more. Today, we understand that the Hill sphere is not just a gravitational boundary. It is a map of our future, a development plan for human civilization for centuries to come, a space for growth and prosperity that will last for more than 1 millennium. And the most amazing thing is that this future does not require any fantastic technologies or revolutionary breakthroughs from us. The development of the Hill sphere can begin today, using technologies that either already exist or are in the development stage. That is why the Hill sphere is not a distant dream, but a very real prospect for our children and grandchildren. Our cosmic backyard awaits us, and it's time to start setting it up. If the first chapter showed us the scale of our cosmic home, now let's talk about what makes this home truly luxurious. The unimaginable energy riches that await us in the Hill sphere. Imagine you've lived your whole life in a small apartment with a single light bulb, and then suddenly you find yourself in a huge palace where every room is flooded with bright sunlight. Humanity is facing a similar transition with the development of near-Earth space. 50,000 suns overhead. Let's start with the main figure that should capture everyone's imagination. The notional surface of the Hill sphere receives 50,000 times more solar energy than our planet gets. 50,000 times. To understand what this means, let's make a simple comparison. All of modern humanity's energy, all the power plants, all the factories, all the transport, consumes about as much energy as our planet receives from the sun. And in the Hill sphere, there is 50,000 times more of this energy. This means that every person in future space settlements will have access to an amount of energy that entire cities consume today. Energy poverty will become a concept of the past, just as mammoth hunting is for us today. A kilowatt in every square meter. But let's come down from the heights of global statistics to more understandable figures. Every square meter of space in the region of Earth's orbit receives more than a kilowatt of solar energy. That's more than a working electric kettle consumes and is comparable to the power of a small heater. And this energy is available around the clock, without breaks for the night, without losses due to cloud cover, without seasonal fluctuations. The cosmic sun never sets, never hides behind clouds. It is a stable, reliable, endless source of energy. The industrial development of near space, with its more than a kilowatt of solar energy per square meter of surface, becomes incredibly profitable after solving the transportation problem. And transportation technologies are developing by leaps and bounds. A revolution in space energy. But here, an amazing discovery awaits us. It turns out that to effectively use space energy, it is not at all necessary to build those fragile solar panels that we are used to seeing on the roofs of houses or on spacecraft. Permanent space power plants will do without fragile, capricious, rapidly burning out in the sun, and toxic in production solar panels. Instead, a solar power station based on liquid metal or a composite salt solution proves to be much more profitable in the long run. Imagine huge mirrors concentrating sunlight on a container with molten metal or special salts. The heated liquid drives turbines that generate electricity. Such a system can operate for decades without maintenance, is not afraid of cosmic radiation and meteoroids, and most importantly, it can be built from materials mined directly in space. The ecological perfection of the future. Now imagine a world where there is so much energy that it can be spent even on the most energy-intensive waste recycling processes. With a sufficiently developed belt of near-Earth solar power stations, even methane-based hydrocarbon fuel can be produced in a closed-loop recovery cycle. This means that the carbon dioxide released from burning fuel can be converted back into fuel using excess space energy. The result is a perfect closed cycle with no waste or emissions. Such a solution frees humanity from the need to fuss with the toxic and expensive production of batteries for electric motors, while retaining all the advantages of the mass-to-thrust ratio of a good internal combustion engine. And here, the author of the text makes a funny comparison. The mad Chatlanians on the distant Pluke processed water into fuel. The tough Patsacks from planet Earth will most likely process the carbon footprint of industry into fuel. And that will be the end of that question. Forever. Gigawatts for humanity. Dear listeners, it is difficult for us to imagine the scale of future energy. Modern nuclear power plants generate energy measured in gigawatts, billions of watts. And future space solar power stations will be able to produce gigawatts, thousands of gigawatts. Each such station will be comparable in size to a small city, but its energy power will surpass the entire modern energy output of entire countries. And there could be thousands of such stations in the Hill sphere. Energy democratization. But the most amazing thing is that the abundance of energy will completely change the very nature of human civilization. When energy becomes practically free and endless, many of the limitations that currently restrain humanity's development will disappear. It will be possible to desalinate seawater in any quantity, turn deserts into blooming gardens, and recycle any waste into useful materials. Energy-intensive processes that are currently economically unviable will become commonplace. In space settlements, each family will be able to have energy capacities that are today available only to large enterprises. This will open up unprecedented opportunities for creativity, scientific research, and the creation of works of art. A continuous flow of abundance. And remember the main difference between space and terrestrial energy: its stability. On Earth, solar energy depends on the time of day, the season, and the weather. In space, the sun shines constantly with the same intensity without any interruptions. This means that all industry, all residential settlements, all infrastructure of space cities can operate at maximum efficiency 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, without weekends or holidays. The path to energy abundance. Of course, the construction of the first space power plants will require enormous effort and investment. But as soon as the first station is built, it will be able to provide energy for the construction of the next 10. And those, in turn, will provide energy for 100 new ones. This is a classic example of exponential growth. A slow start that then turns into an avalanche of development. And at the heart of this avalanche lies a simple physical fact. In space, there is indeed 50,000 times more energy than on Earth. The energy wealth of the Hill sphere is not just a technical detail of future space settlements. It is the foundation of a new type of civilization where an abundance of energy will open up possibilities for humanity that we can only dream of today. If the energy possibilities of the Hill sphere boggle the mind, then the demographic prospects of this space make us completely reconsider all our ideas about the future of humanity. Today, we will talk about how many people can live in our cosmic backyard and how this will change the very nature of human civilization. A game of numbers that changes the world. Let's start with some simple calculations that, however, will lead us to completely fantastic conclusions. The current population density of the Earth is just under 15 people per square kilometer. This is an average figure, taking into account both densely populated megacities and practically empty regions of the planet. Now, let's imagine that we increased this density by just 6 to 7 times, to 100 people per square kilometer. This is not some unimaginable crowding. This corresponds approximately to the population density in comfortable suburban areas of developed countries, where people live in private houses with gardens. Now, let's transfer this density to the surface of the Hill sphere. And here the real magic of large numbers begins. The result is a 2 with 15 zeros. This means that 50 billion people can live comfortably in the Hill sphere, more than 6 times the current population of the Earth. A million great nations, but the political prospects of this demographic growth are even more astonishing. Within the Hill sphere, one could place 1 million states, each significantly larger than modern states, with 1 billion people, like China and India. And this is with the practical absence of conflicts over resources. There will be enough solar energy, space for heat dissipation, and transport accessibility for everyone. Think about this number: 1 million states. Today, on the entire planet Earth, there are fewer than 200 independent states. And in the Hill sphere, there could be 5,000 times more. And if we move to more compact countries the size of modern megacities like Moscow or Tokyo, the figure becomes even more impressive. Each such space city-state can become a center of a unique culture, science, and art. From 8 billion to 50 billion. The author reminds us of an important detail. Currently on the planet, there are only 2 states with a population of 1 billion, and the total population is 8 billion people instead of 50 billion. There is room to grow, right? But we are not just talking about quantitative growth. In the coming centuries, the Earth's population has the potential to grow and grow. And what is especially important, the more advanced the technology, the more accessible cheap space energy is, the more people can live comfortably, and the higher the standard of living for everyone becomes. This is radically different from the gloomy predictions of overpopulation that frightened humanity in the 20th century. Space offers us a completely different model of development. Population growth does not lead to a decrease in the standard of living, but, on the contrary, opens up new opportunities for prosperity. A revolution in the organization of labor. But how to organize the work of such a huge number of people? Here, another amazing discovery awaits us. At first glance, it seems difficult and expensive to export the man-hours of Earthlings into space. But in reality, near-Earth production allows for the effective telepresence of a controller, or even an operator, on an unmanned space station. Imagine this. A specialist sits in a comfortable office on Earth, while his hands work in the weightlessness and vacuum of space through remote control systems. Modern communication technologies already allow for the control of complex mechanisms at a distance with virtually no delay. The same applies to large computing centers, scientific libraries, financial and control organizations, and any type of entertainment industry. All these spheres of activity can serve space settlements while physically remaining on Earth. Cities among the stars. Of course, in reality, space settlements will be distributed unevenly. Most of them will be concentrated in the most advantageous areas of the Earth-Moon system, at Lagrange points 4 and 5. These special places, where the gravitational forces of the Earth and the Sun mutually balance, will become the natural centers of space civilization. But even this concentration will not create problems with overpopulation. Remember, the volume of the Hill sphere is 11 million times greater than the volume of the Earth. Even if humanity settles only 1% of this space, there will be enough room for millennia of development. Quality of life in space. And what is most surprising, life in space settlements may turn out to be more comfortable than on Earth. The absence of natural disasters, complete control over the climate, an abundance of energy, the absence of pollution. All these factors create ideal conditions for human prosperity. Each space city can choose its own ecological niche. One will reproduce a Mediterranean climate, another will create the conditions of northern forests, a third will become a tropical paradise. The diversity of living conditions in space may surpass that of Earth. Demographic waves of the future. This demographic explosion in space will not happen overnight. At first, hundreds of specialists will live in space settlements, then thousands, then tens of thousands. But when the process gains momentum, the growth will become exponential. Each new generation born in space will perceive life among the stars as natural. For them, Earth will not be their native home, but their historical homeland. Important, revered, but not the only possible place to live. The cultural diversity of space. 1 million states in the Hill sphere are not just administrative units. They are 1 million different experiments in the field of social structure, culture, art, and science. Each space city can become a laboratory for new forms of human community. Some settlements will preserve earthly traditions, others will create completely new cultural forms. The isolation of space will allow different human communities to develop independently, creating a diversity of civilizations never seen before. An economy of abundance. With such a scale of population and available energy, the economy of space settlements will become an economy of abundance. Basic material needs will be met automatically, and human activity will focus on creativity, research, and personal development. The competition for resources, which has defined the development of terrestrial civilization for millennia, will give way to cooperation in mastering the endless possibilities of space. The demographic explosion in the Hill sphere is not just an increase in the number of people. It is a qualitative transformation of human civilization, a transition to a new type of society based on abundance, diversity, and limitless opportunities for development. After we have discussed the grand scale of the Hill sphere, its energy riches and demographic potential, it's time to delve into the specific locations where the first space settlements will be built. And here, an amazing discovery awaits us. Nature itself has taken care to create the perfect sites for our future cities among the stars. Cosmic oases of gravity. Imagine you are on a carousel, holding 2 balls in your hands. If you place one ball exactly between your hands, it will stay in place, not being pulled to either the left or the right hand. This is roughly how Lagrange points work. Special places in space where the gravitational forces of different celestial bodies mutually balance each other. In the Earth-Sun system, there are 5 such points, but points L4 and L5 are of particular interest to us. They are located in the same orbit as Earth, but are 60 degrees ahead of and behind it, exactly 1/3 of the orbital path. In reality, the future space cities will be quite heavily concentrated in these most advantageous areas of the dynamic Earth-Moon system, at Lagrange, points 4 and 5, and this is no accident. These locations have unique advantages for space settlements. The perfect balance of forces. What makes points L4 and L5 so special? In these places, the gravitational pull of the Earth and the Sun creates a stable equilibrium. A space object placed at a Lagrange point will remain there with virtually no energy expenditure to maintain its position. It's as if you found a spot in a mountain river where the currents from different sides converge so perfectly that your boat can stay still without any effort on your part. The Lagrange points are such coves in the ocean of space. Moreover, these points have the amazing property of stability. If an object deviates slightly from the equilibrium point, gravitational forces will gently pull it back. This means that space cities at the Lagrange points will not require constant fuel expenditure to maintain their position. Transport accessibility. But stability is only one of the advantages of the Lagrange points. Equally important is their transport accessibility. In the Earth-Moon Deep Near-Earth Space System, the Lagrange points L4 and L5 are easily accessible for internal space flights. A real space tram could be launched between the space cities in these areas, literally on a steel cable. Imagine cars sliding along a cable stretched in the void between orbital stations, like a cable car in the mountains, only in zero gravity. A lunar space elevator, which is fully realizable with modern materials, can effectively service these space cities. And a sufficiently powerful lunar electromagnetic catapult could successfully launch transport containers with correctable flight paths directly to the settlements at the Lagrange points. The architecture of the first settlements. So what will these first space cities look like? The conditions at the Lagrange points impose certain requirements on their architecture, but at the same time open up unprecedented possibilities. The absence of gravity means that buildings can be constructed in any orientation. A city can grow not only in width and height, but in all directions simultaneously. Imagine a three-dimensional labyrinth of residential modules connected by passages where the concepts of up and down lose their meaning. The first orbital stations will likely be modest in size, just a few hundred residents. But as technology develops and experience is gained, they will grow. Modular architecture will allow for simply adding new sections to existing cities. Each module can specialize in a specific function. Residential blocks, production workshops, scientific laboratories, recreational areas. And they will be connected by sealed tunnels through which people can move on foot or in small vehicles. Energy efficiency. The Lagrange points provide not only transport, but also energy advantages. Located in the same orbit as Earth, they receive a stable flow of solar energy, more than a kilowatt per square meter without any atmospheric interference. Solar panels at these points can operate at maximum efficiency around the clock. The absence of an atmosphere means that there is no need to account for cloudiness, fog, or seasonal changes. The sun shines constantly and with the same intensity. Moreover, in zero gravity, it is possible to build solar power stations of gigantic sizes. Structures that would collapse under their own weight on Earth can reach kilometers in size in space. Imagine delicate trusses made of lightweight materials, carrying thousands of square meters of solar panels. Logistical advantages. The unique location of the Lagrange points creates ideal conditions for space logistics. From these points, it is equally easy to get to Earth, the Moon, and other areas of near-Earth space. Cargo ships will be able to use the Lagrange points as transfer bases, loading up with minerals on the Moon, making a stop at L4 or L5 for refueling and maintenance, and then delivering the cargo to orbital factories or back to Earth. This is especially important for heavy cargo. Instead of transporting ore from the Moon directly to Earth, overcoming Earth's gravity well, it would be more profitable to process it at the Lagrange points and send the finished products to Earth. The first inhabitants of space. Who will be the first permanent residents of these space cities? Most likely, they will be specialists in maintaining solar power stations, operators of automated production facilities, and researchers studying the conditions of life in space. Unlike temporary expeditions, these people will live in space for years. They will have families, and children will be born. Gradually, a special culture of space settlers will form. People for whom life among the stars will become natural. Telepresence will allow many specialists to work in space while physically remaining on Earth. But there will also be those who prefer permanent residence in zero-gravity conditions with their unique opportunities for scientific research, industrial production, and simply a new way of life. Expansion of settlements. The first space cities at the Lagrange points will become prototypes for larger settlements. The experience gained will allow for the construction of increasingly larger structures, from stations for hundreds of residents to real space megacities. As technology develops, new architectural solutions will emerge. Perhaps we will see rotating cities that create artificial gravity, or transparent domes under which real gardens will grow in zero gravity. A gateway to deep space. But most importantly, the Lagrange points will become the gateway for the further exploration of space. From here, expeditions to asteroids, to the moons of the gas giants, and to the far reaches of the solar system will be launched. The experience of living in space accumulated in these settlements, the perfected technologies, the developed infrastructure, all this will become the basis for the next stage of humanity's space expansion. The Lagrange points are not just convenient places for construction. They are the first steps on the ladder that will lead us to the stars. And this ladder begins today in the most advantageous areas of our cosmic backyard. After getting acquainted with the Lagrange points, it's time to talk about one of the most exciting and inspiring projects in the history of astronautics. The space cities of Gerard K. O'Neill. This American physicist and visionary, back in the 1970s of the 20th century, developed detailed plans for huge space settlements that still seem like a marvel of engineering thought today. The grandeur of O'Neill's vision. When people talk about O'Neill's space cities, numbers come to mind that take your breath away. Even O'Neill's early projects proposed 800 square kilometers of living surface. To understand the scale, let me put it this way. This is larger than the area of many terrestrial protected natural zones, larger than the territory of major national parks. 800 square kilometers. This is an area that could easily accommodate a city the size of St. Petersburg. Just imagine a whole metropolis floating in the emptiness of space with parks, lakes, residential areas, and industrial zones. Gerard K. O'Neill included in his projects for the exploration and settlement of space calculations that showed the possibility of accommodating 25 billion people on Earth while maintaining a high standard of living. 25 billion people, with the technologies of 1975, without modern computer networks, without genetically modified organisms, only with primitive chemical fertilizers. The miracle of artificial gravity. But how to ensure a comfortable life in such space cities? Here, O'Neill proposed a brilliantly simple solution: artificial gravity through rotation. Space experiments by biologists quickly proved that a normal, healthy child can only be raised in conditions that simulate Earth's gravity. This is achieved by rotating a sufficiently large structure, a couple of kilometers in diameter. Imagine a giant wheel or cylinder slowly rotating in the void of space. Due to centrifugal force, people living on the inner surface of this wheel feel a pull, as if on Earth. This is not just a technical solution. It is a return to familiar living conditions. In such cities, you can walk on the ground instead of floating in weightlessness. You can pour water from a glass. you can grow ordinary plants. Artificial gravity makes space settlements real homes for humans, not just workstations. The climatic diversity of space. And this is where it gets most interesting. For the last 50 years, an artificial space habitat with simulated terrestrial conditions has by default been imagined as a green suburb with the perfect climate of the temperate zone. But in reality, any climatic zone can be chosen, from the harsh tundra of the polar regions to the equatorial jungles. Imagine this. One space city reproduces the climate of Scandinavia with its coniferous forests, clear lakes, and northern lights, which can be created artificially here. Another city becomes a tropical paradise with palm trees, waterfalls, and bright birds. A third recreates the vast steppes with endless grassy plains and a free wind. Each of O'Neill's space cities can become a unique climatic experiment, a living laboratory where humanity studies and perfects various ecosystems. And what's amazing, it's easier to do this in space than on Earth, where one has to contend with the existing climate. Future space sanctuaries. But an even more impressive prospect is the creation of ideal sanctuaries in space. Any sufficiently large conservation fund with good financing will be able to afford a perfect backup of any threatened terrestrial natural zone, any life form, or even just a corner of the planet beloved by the sponsor. Endangered species will receive not only a refuge, but also ideal conditions for reproduction. Disappearing ecosystems will be recreated in the smallest detail, but without the threats that destroy them on Earth, without pollution, without poaching, without climatic catastrophes. Imagine a space sanctuary where the last Amur tigers live, not in zoo cages, but in the vastness of a real taiga. Or a space island where coral reefs flourish, knowing no threat from global warming and ocean pollution. Architectural wonders of zero gravity. The design of O'Neill's space cities opens up unprecedented architectural possibilities. In conditions of controlled gravity, buildings of any height and shape can be constructed. Skyscrapers can stretch towards the city center, where gravity weakens, creating amazing visual effects. Parks and gardens can be located not only on the ground, but also on the inner surfaces of the cylinder, creating the feeling that the sky is a continuation of the earthly landscape. Rivers can flow in circular routes, and waterfalls can fall upwards towards the city center. In zones with reduced gravity closer to the axis of rotation, people can feel like birds, flying with the help of light wings or just strong flaps of their arms. Sports and entertainment will take on completely new forms. Ecological perfection. At the stage of mass settlement of near-Earth space, Earth's ecological problems will be solved one after another with the same speed and efficiency as the problems of resource scarcity. In O'Neill's space cities, it is possible to create perfect closed-loop ecosystems where the waste from some processes becomes the raw material for others. The carbon dioxide exhaled by people is absorbed by plants. Organic waste is processed into fertilizers. Water circulates in an endless cycle of purification and reuse. Such cities will become a model of ecological purity that is impossible to achieve on Earth with its established industrial systems and natural processes. Social experiments in Space O'Neill's space cities are not only technical and ecological marvels, but also a unique opportunity for social experiments. Each city can choose its own model of social structure, its own culture, its own traditions. One city could become a scientific center where only researchers and their families live. Another, an artistic commune dedicated to creating new forms of art in conditions of artificial gravity. A third, an experimental settlement testing new forms of democracy or economics. The isolation of space cities will allow different human communities to develop independently, creating an unprecedented diversity of cultures and lifestyles. Technological achievements. The construction of O'Neill's cities will require the development of many advanced technologies, materials capable of withstanding huge loads during rotation, life support systems that work for decades without failure, automated production complexes capable of providing the cities with everything they need. But each of these technologies will also find application on Earth. Closed-loop life support systems will help solve the planet's ecological problems. Super-strong materials will allow for the construction of skyscrapers of unprecedented height. Production automation will make goods cheaper and of better quality. The legacy of a visionary, Gerard K. O'Neill, was not just a scientist. He was a dreamer who managed to translate his dreams into precise calculations and engineering blueprints. His projects showed humanity that space cities are not science fiction, but a very real prospect. Today, almost half a century later, technology has finally caught up with his vision. Materials he could only dream of have become a reality. Computer control systems have reached unprecedented complexity. Robotics and automation have made the construction and maintenance of giant structures possible. O'Neill's space cities are a bridge between our earthly past and our cosmic future. Places where humanity can preserve all the best of earthly life while gaining new opportunities for development and creativity among the stars. We have already discussed the Hill Sphere's space, its energy riches, demographic prospects, and space cities. But all this would be impossible without a powerful industrial base. Today, let's talk about what production will look like in space. It's a completely new type of industry that will change the very nature of human civilization. The energy advantage of space mining. Let's start with the fundamental principle of space economics. Anything brought to a space factory from space wins out over what is brought from Earth purely in terms of energy. Physics is a ruthless science. The energy price of delivery must always be paid. Imagine, to lift 1 ton of cargo from the Earth's surface to low Earth orbit, you need to expend energy equivalent to several tons of rocket fuel. But to deliver the same ton of material from an asteroid to a space factory, a gentle push is enough. The asteroid's gravity is negligible. Although at first the terrestrial transport umbilical cord will supply space with everything necessary for life and work, the replacement of this resource dependency will happen relatively quickly and efficiently. The Moon, humanity's cosmic quarry, short, simple, and cheap space resource chains based on lunar materials alone guarantee abundant supplies. And here, a pleasant surprise awaits us. Oxygen will become a waste exhaust of practically any space resource process. Silicon, iron, aluminum, titanium, magnesium, water. All of this is abundant in lunar rocks. The Moon turns out to be 30 times larger than the entire asteroid belt. We can dismantle for resources just the top, easiest to mine and process layer of lunar regolith for millennia. And these are not empty words. Lunar dust contains practically all the elements necessary for building space cities and industrial complexes. The Moon's low gravity, only 1/6 of Earth's, makes the extraction and transportation of materials incredibly profitable. What would require powerful excavators and freight trains on Earth can be done on the Moon with literally a shovel. Unique production opportunities in space production. In zero gravity and vacuum opens up completely new horizons. In the absence of gravity, it's possible to create alloys and materials that are simply impossible to obtain on Earth. Metals do not separate by density, liquids form perfect spheres, and crystals grow with a perfect structure. The vacuum of space becomes an ideal protective environment for many production processes. No oxygen means no oxidation of metals. No atmospheric pressure means it's easy to create ultra-high temperatures for melting the most refractory materials. Imagine a space factory for producing ultra-pure crystals for electronics. On Earth, such crystals cost thousands of dollars per gram due to the difficulty of creating ideal conditions. In space, these ideal conditions exist naturally. The telepresence revolution. But how to manage these space production facilities? Near-Earth production allows for the effective telepresence of a controller, or even an operator, on an unmanned station. It's possible to work even in zero gravity and vacuum while physically remaining in the comfort of Earth's gravity. Over the last few years of the previous and the beginning of the current millennium, progress in communication quality has become noticeable. Modern systems allow for the control of complex mechanisms in almost real time. The signal delay to space production facilities in the Hill sphere is a matter of seconds, which is quite acceptable for most operations. Imagine, an engineer sits in an office in Moscow, and his hands, through a remote control system, assemble complex structures at an orbital factory. He sees the process in the finest detail through high-resolution cameras, feels the resistance of materials through tactile feedback, and controls robotic manipulators with surgical precision. Automated industrial giants. The same applies to large computing centers, scientific libraries, financial and control organizations, and any type of entertainment industry. There is a lot of this on Earth, and all of it can serve the space industry. A huge space industrial complex may have relatively small living quarters for temporary inspectors, controllers, and adjusters. Everything else will operate completely unmanned. Modern automated control systems allow for the creation of production facilities that operate for months without human intervention. In space, where there is no corrosion, weather conditions, and many other terrestrial problems, such systems can function for years. Rare earth metals and asteroid mining. The modern economy desperately needs rare earth metals. These elements are critical for the production of electronics, solar panels, and batteries. On Earth, their reserves are limited and often located in hard-to-reach places. With considerable probability, an unmanned space system for searching for and mining such metals will be deployed in space before the first large human settlement with a full simulation of terrestrial conditions, simply because it is more profitable. One small asteroid may contain more platinum than has been mined on Earth throughout all of human history. And near-Earth asteroids allow for the creation of a total living volume equal to about 300 surfaces of the Earth. Gigawatts of energy for industry. The industrial development of near space, with its more than a kilowatt of solar energy per square meter of surface, becomes incredibly profitable after solving the transportation problem. In space, it's possible to build production facilities that consume colossal amounts of energy. Processes that are considered energetically unprofitable on Earth, for example, extracting rare elements from common rocks, become profitable in space thanks to virtually free solar energy. Permanent structures will do without fragile, capricious, quickly burning out in the sun, and toxic in production solar panels. A solar power station based on liquid metal or a composite salt solution proves to be much more profitable in the long run. New materials of the space age. In conditions of zero gravity and ultra-high vacuum, it is possible to create materials with unique properties. Metal foams with incredibly low density but high strength. Composite materials with a perfectly ordered structure. Superconductors that work at higher temperatures. Space factories will be able to produce optical glass of perfect purity for telescopes, the size of which on Earth is limited by atmospheric distortions. Semiconductor crystals of perfect structure for future computer technology. Metal alloys that cannot be obtained on Earth due to differences in density. Closed-loop production cycles. In space production, the idea of completely closed cycles can be realized. The waste from one process becomes the raw material for another. Carbon dioxide from human life support goes to grow plants. Plant waste is recycled into biofuel or fertilizers. Scrap metal is remelted into new products without loss of quality. In zero gravity, there is no gravitational separation of components. Even human waste can be completely recycled and incorporated into the biological cycles of space cities. The space factories of the future. Imagine a space factory for producing spaceships. Raw materials are mined on asteroids and delivered with virtually no energy cost. Parts are manufactured in zero gravity with ideal precision. Assembly takes place in open space, where there are no limitations on the size of the structures. Such ships will be many times larger and more complex than anything that can be built on Earth. They will not need to be lifted against Earth's gravity. They are initially created in space for work in space. Development prospects. The creation of a sufficient number of inhabited space production centers will make it possible to find a supplier of the required goods or raw materials at the right time at any given moment. The space industry will become as reliable and predictable as the terrestrial one, but at the same time much more efficient and environmentally friendly. The sun will remain the basis of local energy and industry. Powerful mirror power stations will be sufficient to meet any local needs within the entire green belt of the solar system, up to and including the asteroid belt. The industry of the Hill sphere will become the engine of human civilization, a source of abundance and technological progress. It will provide the material basis for the exploration of deep space and, ultimately, for the transformation of humanity into an interstellar civilization. The development of the Hill sphere will not only not harm Earth's nature, but on the contrary, it will become the key to solving all the ecological problems of our planet. Space will open up a path for us to ecological perfection, which humanity could only dream of. A revolution in carbon cycles. With a sufficiently developed belt of near-Earth solar power stations, even methane-based hydrocarbon fuel can be produced in a closed-loop recovery cycle. This solution will forever rid us of the need to bother with the toxic and expensive production of batteries for electric motors while preserving all the advantages of internal combustion engines. Imagine, the carbon dioxide that pollutes the atmosphere today will become the raw material for fuel production tomorrow. With the help of excess space energy, we will be able to convert CO2 back into hydrocarbons, creating a perfect closed cycle with no waste. The author humorously remarks, "The mad Chatlanians on the distant Pluke processed water into fuel. The tough patsacks from planet Earth will most likely process the carbon footprint of industry into fuel. And that will be the end of that question, forever." This is not just a technical solution. It is a complete rethinking of industrial ecology. Instead of the linear model of extract, produce, dispose, we get a cyclical system where the waste of one process becomes the raw material for another. Space sanctuaries, a new era of conservation. But even more impressive are the prospects for preserving biodiversity. Any sufficiently large conservation fund with good financing will be able to afford a perfect backup of any threatened terrestrial natural zone, any life form, or even just a corner of the planet beloved by the sponsor. Even O'Neill's early projects proposed 800 square kilometers of living surface. That's more than many terrestrial protected natural areas, and this is just the beginning. As space technologies develop, the size of these sanctuaries will grow. Imagine a space sanctuary where the last Amur tigers live, not in cramped enclosures, but in the vastness of a real taiga. Coral reefs that know no threat of ocean warming and pollution. Tropical forests where every tree grows in ideal conditions. Perfect ecosystems among the stars. In space cities, any climatic zone can be chosen, from the harsh tundra of the polar regions to the equatorial jungles. A perfect replica of any sanctuary can be built in space with the utmost precision. But these will not be just copies of terrestrial ecosystems. In conditions of a controlled climate, absence of natural disasters and diseases, it is possible to create ecosystems even better than the originals. Each plant receives the optimal amount of light, water, and nutrients. Each animal lives in conditions perfectly suited for its species. Moreover, in space, it is possible to recreate ecosystems that have already disappeared from the face of the Earth. The mammoth steppes of the Pleistocene, the forests of the Carboniferous period, the coral reefs of the Cretaceous Sea. All of this can bloom again among the stars, solving Earth's ecological crisis. At the stage of mass settlement of near-Earth space, Earth's ecological problems will be solved one after another with the same speed and efficiency as the problems of resource scarcity. Polluting industries will move to space, where they cannot harm living nature. Mining will focus on lifeless asteroids and moons. Energy will completely switch to solar power stations in space. Earth will gradually turn into a giant nature park, where industry will be represented only by environmentally friendly production. Cities will become green, the air clean, the rivers clear. Technologies for ecological perfection. Space technologies will give Earth new ways to solve environmental problems. Closed-loop life support systems developed for space stations will find application in terrestrial cities. Waste recycling methods created for space settlements will help get rid of landfills. Solar power stations based on liquid metal or composite salt solution in the long term and on a large scale prove to be much more profitable than traditional solar panels. They do not contain toxic materials, do not burn out from solar radiation, and can operate for decades without replacement. A new environmental ethic. The exploration of space will also change humanity's attitude towards nature itself. When we have the opportunity to create perfect ecosystems in space, we will reevaluate the uniqueness of Earth's nature. Each species, each ecosystem will become a priceless source of information for creating space analogs. Endangered species will get not just a chance for survival, but also the opportunity to develop in ideal conditions. Some species in space sanctuaries may even surpass their terrestrial populations in number. Biodiversity without borders. In space, we can experiment with creating new ecosystems that have never existed on Earth. Mixing flora and fauna from different continents and eras, creating conditions for evolution in new directions. Imagine a space island where sequoias from California grow and kangaroos from Australia jump between them. Or an ecosystem where dinosaurs graze in forests of giant ferns under an artificial sun, saving a vanishing heritage. Many terrestrial ecosystems are on the verge of extinction due to human activity. The tropical forests of the Amazon, the coral reefs of the Pacific Ocean, the Arctic tundra, all of them can be preserved in space sanctuaries. But this will not be just conservation, it will be development. In the ideal conditions of space cities, these ecosystems will be able to achieve a biological diversity that they never had on Earth. The ecological industry of space. The space industry is initially created on the principles of ecological perfection. The waste from one process automatically becomes the raw material for another. Energy comes from an inexhaustible solar source. Production does not pollute the atmosphere because there simply isn't one. Oxygen becomes a waste exhaust of practically any space resource process. What is a valuable resource on Earth turns out to be a byproduct of metallurgy in space. Planetary rehabilitation. As space civilization develops, it will become possible not only to preserve Earth's nature, but also to restore what has already been lost. Extinct species can be recreated using genetic technologies and raised in space sanctuaries. Destroyed ecosystems can be restored using the experience of creating artificial ecosystems in space. Polluted territories can be cleaned up using technologies developed for recycling space debris. A future without ecological problems. Ecological revival through the exploration of space is not a utopia, but a very real prospect. When most of human activity moves to space, Earth will have a chance to recover from millennia of intensive use. Space sanctuaries will not be a replacement for Earth's nature, but its continuation and development. The biological diversity of human civilization will increase thousands of times. Each ecosystem will get ideal conditions for thriving. The development of the Hill sphere will open a new chapter in the relationship between man and nature, a chapter where this relationship finally becomes harmonious and mutually beneficial. We have discussed the grand prospects of developing the Hill sphere, but the main question remains: when will all this happen? And what technological breakthroughs will be needed to turn these plans into reality? Today, let's take a journey through time and see how humanity's space civilization will develop step by step. Stages of space expansion. It is quite obvious that transport accessibility will break down the settlement of space into major stages. You cannot skip steps. Each stage must create the foundation for the next. The development of the Earth-Moon space system will become a virtually mandatory condition for large-scale expansion further into space. This is our first step into deep space, the base for all further achievements. The asteroid belt, with a logistical, economic, and political center on Ceres, will become the second major milestone of expansion. A necklace of space cities in these orbits will create a system of cheap internal logistics and a gateway for launching new people and technology both to the inner planets and to the outer ones. The 2030s, first steps into space. The first stage of space expansion will begin as early as the 2030s of the current century. This will be a time of the first permanently inhabited orbital stations, which will be much larger and more complex than the modern International Space Station. The Sun will remain the basis of local energy and industry. The first powerful mirror power stations will be sufficient to meet any local needs within near space. For now, these will be modest structures by space standards, a few hundred meters across. During this time, the problem of transporting cargo from Earth will be solved. Perhaps the first space elevators or more efficient reusable rockets will appear. Each kilogram of cargo in orbit will still cost thousands of dollars, but this will already allow for the creation of a self-sufficient industry. The 40s to 60s, the era of megastructures. The second stage will begin with the appearance of early space megastructures and, possibly, effective controlled thermonuclear fusion. Within the green belt of the solar system, electromagnetic catapults and laser acceleration arrays will be able to operate on the energy of conventional solar power stations. A large electromagnetic catapult will launch self-propelled transport containers at the price of electricity without expending propellant. A laser acceleration array will provide a sufficient energy flow to a container's solar sail to correct its flight and maintain constant acceleration. The arrival and departure of cargo will happen at the price of electricity, and travel times will be significantly reduced. A laser sail provides a rather modest acceleration, but in 86,400 seconds, just one day, a great deal can be achieved. During this time, the first O'Neill-style space cities with populations in the tens of thousands will appear. Lunar bases for resource extraction will be built. The asteroid industry will begin to supply rare earth metals. The second half of the century, millions among the stars. By the 60s and 70s, space civilization will reach a critical mass. Continuous rings in low Earth orbit with active electromagnetic support will appear. They will function as the most effective solar power station and Earth-to-space transport system on the planet. The cargo flow in tons will begin to be measured in figures with a considerable number of zeros. Millions of people will be living in space settlements. The first states with populations in the millions will likely arise simultaneously across the entire asteroid belt in different sectors, almost at the same time. Integration into the economy of the inner solar system will be just the beginning of their development. The third stage, a time of true wonders. The third stage will be a time of true megastructures that will truly boggle the imagination. The construction of a Dyson swarm, a system of solar collectors around the sun, will begin. Effective mining of minerals on the sun itself will appear. A large solar laser will become an external drive of both intrasystem and interstellar significance. A sufficiently large system for mining minerals on the sun will become an effective interstellar drive for the entire solar system as a whole. Complex city ships will become the foundation of the solar system's economy and the first interstellar expeditions. These will be single structures made up of a large number of residential, industrial, and storage units, totaling millions and tens of millions in population. Technological breakthroughs, the keys to space. What technologies will be required to implement these plans? Any modern breakthrough inevitably leads to progress in a huge number of related industries. The history of Russian agricultural optimization in the USSR is a testament to this. The vast majority of modern astronautic successes are a direct consequence of the success of computer technologies. The reusable rocket of the 1960s, with a crew of 4 pilots, remained on the drawing boards. But the reusable rocket of the 2000s, with a crew consisting of a smartphone, flies successfully. The energy revolution. The central technological breakthrough will be the solution to the energy problem. The industrial development of near space, with its more than a kilowatt of solar energy per square meter of surface, will become incredibly profitable after solving the transportation problem. A solar power station based on liquid metal or a composite salt solution will, in the long term and on a large scale, prove to be much more profitable than fragile and toxic solar panels. Such stations will be able to operate for decades without maintenance and produce gigawatts of energy. The transportation revolution. The solution to the transportation problem will occur in stages. First, more efficient rockets will appear, reducing the cost of delivering cargo to orbit by tens of times. Then, space elevators, electromagnetic catapults, and laser acceleration systems. Each new transport technology will open up access to new areas of space. While the first orbital stations will depend on supplies from Earth, cities at the Lagrange points will be able to provide for themselves with lunar resources. Materials, science breakthroughs. Space exploration will require materials with unique properties, ultralight and super-strong composites for large structures in zero gravity, radiation-resistant materials for working in open space, self-healing coatings for protection against micrometeoroids. Many of these materials can only be produced in conditions of zero gravity and vacuum. This will create a closed loop of development. The space industry will produce materials for the construction of new space facilities. Biological technologies, the creation of closed-loop ecosystems for space cities, will require a revolution in biology. Genetically modified plants capable of efficiently processing life support waste. Microorganisms that produce oxygen and food from mineral raw materials. Perhaps technologies for adapting humans to life in space will appear. Not necessarily radical changes, but improvements that help to better tolerate weightlessness and radiation. Information technologies, managing complex space systems, will require a new level of artificial intelligence. Autonomous robots capable of building and maintaining space facilities. Telepresence systems that allow specialists on Earth to work in space. Quantum communications will provide instantaneous connection between different parts of the space civilization. This is especially important for managing automated systems over long distances. Social technologies, social innovations will be no less important. New forms of governance for space settlements, economic models for societies of abundance, legal systems to regulate relations between space states. Each space city can become an experimental platform for new forms of human community. The isolation of space will allow different communities to develop independently. Development milestones. Over the several thousand years that will pass from the first space settlements to the mass settlement of the main economic belts of the solar system, people will have fully mastered the main industrial centers on an unimaginable scale. But the main changes will happen in the coming decades. By the end of the current century, humanity could become a truly spacefaring civilization with millions of inhabitants among the stars. We have talked a lot about the grand prospects of developing the Hill sphere, but it would be dishonest to remain silent about the serious challenges that stand in the way of this future. Today, let's talk frankly about the obstacles, technological, economic, social, and political, that humanity will have to overcome. The main problem, transport delay. The seemingly anecdotal transportation problem turns out to be one of the main obstacles to the development of space civilization. Imagine this. The wire telegraph and radio successfully solved the tasks of almost instantaneous communication within the globe over a few decades at the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries. But what good is this communication if the army of one state needs to embark on a heroic 6-month sea voyage just to get to where the army of the second state is already fighting? In space, this problem is even more acute. For many centuries, the absolute majority of relatively distant space settlements will find themselves in a position where any forces and resources are knowingly useless if they are far from the scene of events. This will remain so until the advent of powerful, high-specific impulse engines of any type. When the arrival of a specialist to solve an issue on site requires a month or more, the colonial model rapidly collapses. Self-sufficient local systems that can solve the issue with their own efforts come to the forefront. Modern technological barriers. Modern technologies create a whole range of obstacles to the large-scale exploration of space. In space, there is no horizon and no atmosphere, powerful obstacles to effective observation from Earth. But at the same time, light pollution in space is significant. The sun gives off such a stream of light that to the human eye, space looks black. Active optics work noticeably better in microgravity, but active support systems require a huge number of relatively small but extremely agile elements. Modern micro-actuators and computers have taken on one of the main problems of large-scale astronomy. They have solved the difficulties with mirror deformation under the influence of external forces. But every problem solved creates new challenges. An active mirror, consisting of many moving elements, requires incredible precision in control and constant monitoring. The economic challenges of space. The gravity of celestial bodies works against the rapid exploration of space. Even on such rich planets as Mercury, one has to face serious economic constraints. The force of gravity, 2.5 times higher than on the Moon, with all of the Moon's problems, raises the minimum price of any effective solution based on local resources. A lot will have to be brought to Mercury just to start working. It would seem that a very rich planet, where in the golden age of science fiction they regularly went for industrial power, in reality has roughly the same relative set of accessibility problems at the first stages of space exploration as the dusty ovens of almost lifeless deserts do for us today. The problem of investment scale. The construction of the first space cities will require investments comparable to the budgets of entire nations. With an effective range of a complex consisting of a laser, an observation system, and a sail of one light week, it will be necessary to build several dozen intermediate acceleration stations within 1 light year from the Sun. Compared to modern Earth, this is a full-fledged state of unimaginable power, a space superpower. The total population of one midway station can vary from hundreds of thousands to a few billion people. The social challenges of space expansion. The exploration of space will radically change the social structure of humanity. Any sufficiently large community of like-minded people of at least tens of thousands from a certain point of technological development can afford a dream city, a city-state. But many of these communities will quickly perish due to the low viability of the original political idea. Such a demise is, of course, a tragedy, but an inevitable part of the process of finding optimal forms of human community in space. The political balkanization of space. Even a relatively large center for the settlement of the next wave of space exploration will be developed in a race by everyone who considers it profitable. Some of the near-Earth financial and political structures will be content with selling transport and equipment. Some will demand the payment of dividends through priority resource deliveries, and some will seriously send the majority of their active population towards new spacelands in search of a better life. This will inevitably lead to the emergence of a space Balkans on steroids. The militarization of space. The militarization of space, given its sufficiently active exploration, is a certainty, if only because the interests of various astropolitical partners will often be fundamentally divergent, including those partners who are unlikely to sit down next to each other to read a newspaper in the same field. Space states will initially be formed as diverse communities of people with a common goal and a shared living space, but with very different interests. Sufficient internal transport connectivity, good relations between the participating countries, and a relatively unified foreign policy. And a new state is ready. Problems of governance and communication. In the main regions of the solar system's green belt, the local communication delay is around an hour and fully allows for an adequate and timely exchange of information with representatives on the ground. But for distant space settlements, this delay becomes critical. Any leader who had the real power to make decisions at his own risk and peril perceived the highly compressed diplomatic correspondence mostly as a set of good wishes with a rather free interpretation at his own discretion. Technological obstacles of large structures. With the diagonal size of a single solar sail being many kilometers and the total width of the safety corridor being several hundred kilometers, a complex task of constant observation, precise positioning, and ultra-precise laser aiming arises. Like the absolute majority of technical solutions of the space age, this problem is predominantly quantitative. Qualitative breakthroughs make something more effective or cheaper, but on the whole, the principle of operation remains the same. Ecological and ethical issues. A miss by a peak power beam aimed at a threat to interstellar travel must end up where it will dissipate harmlessly before it falls on some inhabited or poorly studied sector of space. Most likely, we are the first in the galaxy and will be the only ones for a very long time, but it would be all the more offensive to accidentally kill someone. Orbital ping-pong of resources. The different speeds of Earth and other planets around the Sun lead to the fact that at any given moment, with a high probability, only one planet is the closest or at least the most convenient for launch. This creates an effect of orbital ping-pong, where a profitable contract bounces from one supplier to another. Surmountable barriers. Despite all these challenges, it is important to understand most of the obstacles on the path to developing the Hill sphere are quantitative, not qualitative, in nature. The trillions of space cities in a developed solar system are still trying to overcome the barrier of at least 1% of a Dyson swarm's efficiency. Compared to modern Earth, even an intermediate acceleration station represents a full-fledged state of unimaginable power. But compared to a developed space civilization, these are completely negligible scales. Time and patience. The main challenge of developing the Hill sphere is not a technological or economic barrier, but the need for long-term planning and consistent work. Each stage must create the foundation for the next. You cannot skip stages of development. But if humanity finds the wisdom and patience for a phased exploration of space, all these obstacles will prove to be surmountable. History shows there are no technical problems that time, ingenuity, and the persistence of the human mind cannot solve. The challenges and obstacles on the path to developing the Hill sphere are serious, but not insurmountable. They require not revolutionary breakthroughs, but systematic work, rational planning, and a readiness for long-term investments in the future of humanity. Dear friends, we have reached the final chapter of our journey through the Hill sphere. Today, let's look far into the future and imagine how the development of this cosmic palace will become humanity's first step to the stars, to becoming a truly galactic civilization. The Hill sphere, a springboard to the stars. In the few thousand years that will pass from the first space settlements to the mass settlement of the main economic belts of the solar system, people will have fully mastered the main industrial centers on an unimaginable scale. The development of the Hill sphere is not an end goal, but only the first step on the infinite ladder of space expansion. When billions of people live in near-Earth space, when the space industry surpasses the terrestrial one by thousands of times, then humanity will be ready for the next great step: interstellar travel. A large solar laser will become an external drive of both intrasystem and interstellar significance. An external laser drive at least 10% of the speed of light, or a slow flight at single-digit percentages, but also with external supply for the entire duration of the flight by unmanned transport containers. The Dyson swarm, a star's energy in human hands. The excess of metal and silicon on Mercury will likely become the basis for the large-scale construction of the Sun's near-energy belt. The first stages of large-scale near-solar construction are the basis of the so-called Dyson swarm, a virtual sphere around the Sun that uses solar energy and matter with maximum efficiency. At the end of many centuries of construction, the Dyson swarm will collect the absolute majority of the Sun's cheap energy. Its elements closest to the Sun will be able to effectively extract solar matter, which will finally solve the issue of basic resource abundance in the system. This construction, even with the explosive growth of the space population, is more a matter of geological epochs than just millennia. According to early calculations, the building material will require the mass of Jupiter, the heaviest planet in the solar system. The entire thing, all of Jupiter. The complex city ships of the future complex transit cities will become the foundation of the solar system's economy and the first interstellar expeditions. These will be single structures made up of a large number of residential, industrial, and storage units, totaling millions and tens of millions in population. Imagine entire cities capable of traveling between the stars. Not small research ships with a crew of a few people, but real flying civilizations where whole generations of interstellar travelers will be born and raised. Clearing early cosmic superhighways of dust and debris with a stream of light on the way to at least the nearest stars will create real interstellar highways on which caravans of city ships will travel. Unlimited opportunities for development. The further we try to look into such a future, the more our vision is clouded by a deficit of information. We still have too much to learn about the physical dimensions, cost, and capabilities of various space megastructures at various stages of the solar system's exploration. But one thing can be said for sure: the opportunities for humanity's development in space are practically limitless. Each mastered star system will provide access to resources exceeding all the wealth of Earth. Each new planet will become home to billions of people. Building much smaller swarms with single millions or tens of millions of colonists, and accelerating them with a large solar laser could easily prove to be much more profitable. This is also an extremely resilient and reliable interstellar transport vehicle, maintaining a connection with the home planet. In the eyes of Tsiolkovsky, Earth may have been considered the cradle of humanity, but in the reality of humanity's space exploration, it is a huge high-tech factory capable of meeting any need of the early space settlements. Any growth of space infrastructure, development of technologies, and breakthroughs of the probable future affect terrestrial life much faster and more strongly than they do space life. This will continue for many centuries, if not millennia. Earth will never lose its special significance for humanity. Even when trillions of people live among the stars, our home planet will remain the spiritual center of human civilization, the guardian of history, culture, and traditions. New forms of human existence. Interstellar expansion will give rise to new forms of human existence that we cannot even imagine yet. People who will spend their entire lives in flight between the stars. Generations for whom a spaceship will be the only home. Civilizations that will exist in conditions radically different from those on Earth. Each star system can become an experimental platform for new forms of social organization, new technologies, new ways for humans and nature to interact. The diversity of human cultures will increase thousands of times. Encountering the unknown. Perhaps among the stars, humanity will encounter other forms of intelligent life. This will become the greatest event in the history of our species, the first contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. Or perhaps we will turn out to be the first and only ones in our galaxy. Then a special responsibility will fall upon us, to fill the empty worlds with life, reason, and beauty. Technological wonders of the distant future. The harnessing of black holes, wandering stars, the complete dismantling of planetary systems for the construction of megastructures. All this awaits humanity in the distant future. Technologies that today seem like pure fantasy will become commonplace for our descendants. Artificial black holes could become sources of energy surpassing stars. Entire star systems could be moved through space, creating ideal conditions for life. The matter of planets could be completely recycled into space cities and industrial complexes. Eternal expansion. Humanity will never stop in its development. Every goal achieved will open new horizons. Every problem solved will create new challenges. From the Hill sphere to the exploration of the entire solar system, from the solar system to the nearest stars, from the nearest stars to the entire galaxy. And perhaps, someday, our distant descendants will look at other galaxies just as we look at the stars today, as new worlds waiting for their explorers and colonizers. A new era of human civilization. The development of the Hill sphere marks the beginning of a new era in human history, the era of space civilization. It will be a time of unprecedented flourishing of science, art, and culture. A time when humanity finally realizes its full potential. New Vasyuki will indeed become the center of the universe. At least, that part of the universe that will be explored by man. Every space city will become a unique experiment, every colony, a new chapter in the book of human achievements. An immortal legacy. Perhaps the most important achievement of the space age will not be the exploration of new worlds, but the preservation and development of all the best that exists in humanity. Space sanctuaries will preserve Earth's biodiversity. Space cities will become repositories of human knowledge and culture. And even if our sun one day goes out, humanity will continue its existence among the distant stars, carrying into space the light of reason, the beauty of art, and the warmth of the human heart. Conclusion: the road to the stars begins today. Dear friends, our journey through the Hill sphere is coming to an end. We have seen the grand prospects that the exploration of near-Earth space opens up for humanity. We have talked about the technologies that will make this possible, the challenges that must be overcome, and the future that awaits our descendants. The Hill sphere is not just a region of space. It is our future, our destiny, our ticket to the stars. And we can get this ticket today if we find the courage to take the first step. The road to the stars does not begin in the distant future. It begins right now, with every rocket launch, with every scientific discovery, with every person who looks up at the night sky and dreams of flying among the stars. The future of humanity among the stars is not just possible, it is inevitable. And it begins here, in our Hill sphere, in our cosmic backyard, which will become humanity's first home in the infinite universe.